I knew something was wrong before I even pushed the precinct door open. The air felt different, charged, heavier, the kind of atmosphere that forms right before thunder breaks. Conversations that used to flow lazily during shift change snapped shut like traps the second I stepped inside. Nobody said my name, but they didn't need to. The silence said it for them. A few officers pretended not to see me, eyes trained on papers they hadn't been reading. Others stared openly, that slow, crawling look that strips a man down to whatever rumor is clinging to his skin. I walked forward anyway, my boots hitting the tile with a rhythm too steady for what my heartbeat was doing. Coward. I could feel the word in the air, even if no one spoke it. I'd worn this uniform for 14 years and never thought silence could cut deeper than the accusations themselves. But here I was, bleeding from wounds no doctor could stitch. I wasn't even technically cleared to return, but staying home felt worse. Home had become a place where my own walls breathed judgment back at me, replaying every doubt IA had carved into my skull. My wife tried to help. My daughter tried not to ask questions, but the house felt too small, too bright, too honest. The precinct, broken as it was, still felt like the only battlefield I understood, even if I wasn't allowed to fight on it anymore. I slipped past the duty desk. No one nodded, no one stopped me, not even the rookies, who usually stared at me with something like hero worship. Now they stared with something closer to warning. I kept my eyes forward, ignoring the familiar ache that had started living beneath my ribs since the night everything fell apart. My locker felt colder than the metal around it. The key shook in my hand as I slid it into the lock, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing what waited behind the door. The uniform hung inside, clean and crisp, the badge reflecting the fluorescent lights like it had never seen dirt or blood or betrayal. But I remembered the last time I wore it. I remembered the sting of wind against my face, Alvarez's voice beside me, the alley, the blow, the blackout, the empty space where my partner should have been. My hand brushed the fabric as if it could give me answers my memory refused to supply. But all it did was give me a thin echo of a night I'd been punished for without ever being able to defend myself. Behind me, voices floated through the air like poisoned threads. "He really showed his face," one muttered. "Wouldn't be me," another replied. "Not after what he did." Laughter followed, low, careful, but sharp. My stomach tightened, not from guilt, but from frustration. They didn't know the truth because no one had let me speak it. IA asked, but they didn't listen. The department suspended me pending investigation, but no one asked the real questions. All they saw was that my partner vanished, and I didn't have the footage to prove why. Alvarez was gone. I was left standing. That was enough to make me the villain. Facts didn't matter when fear wanted a face. I shut the locker and walked out before my composure cracked. On the way to the exit, my eyes drifted, against my will, to the memorial wall. His picture wasn't up there, not yet. The department couldn't officially declare him gone until the investigation closed, but my heart saw it anyway. His smile, his ridiculous moustache he refused to trim because he said it made him look like the cool kind of detective. My daughter used to call him Uncle Al. Now she avoided the subject entirely. Kids know when adults are lying, even if nobody says the wrong words out loud. They can hear it in the breath between sentences. The cold air outside slapped me awake. I walked to my car, but sat behind the wheel without turning the engine on. The steering wheel was cool beneath my palms, grounding and cruel at the same time. My wife always told me I squeezed it too tightly, like I expected it to break in my hands. Maybe I did. Maybe part of me wanted something, anything, to give under pressure, so it wasn't just me cracking. Rain clouds gathered overhead, dragging the sky into a darker grey. My phone vibrated once against the cup holder. I didn't want to answer. Every call lately meant trouble. IA, union reps, lawyers, friendly updates that didn't feel friendly at all. But the screen didn't show a number, just zeros, all zeros, no origin, no caller. Before I could talk myself out of it, I answered, "Cole." Silence stretched for a moment. Then a faint, distorted voice whispered, "They didn't tell you everything." My entire body froze. "Who is this?" I asked, pulse spiking. A crackle of static answered before the voice came again, low, tight, as if fighting interference or something worse. "You were set up," it said, "and your partner, he's not dead." The world tilted. My grip on the phone tightened until my fingers hurt. "Where is he?" I demanded, but the line clicked dead. The silence that followed was louder than any accusation I'd heard in weeks. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The pieces didn't fit, but they didn't have to. If there was even a chance Alvarez was alive, everything changed. Every rumor, every accusation, every sleepless night where I wondered if I had failed him. I didn't think, I just acted. The next minutes blurred, engine roaring, tires biting into asphalt, the city whirling past as my thoughts narrowed to a single point. Find the truth. Find him. I didn't remember driving home, but I remembered the look on my wife's face when I walked through the door. "What happened?" she asked, voice soft but sharp with worry. I told her everything, each word tasting like disbelief, even though it came from my own mouth. She listened, arms crossed, fingers gripping the fabric of her sweater like she needed something to hold on to. When I finished, she asked, "Do you believe him?" I didn't hesitate. "I have to," I said, "because the alternative is knowing I failed my partner and Alvarez." My voice cracked. "He would have never given up on me." She moved to me, resting her hands on my shoulders. "Then find him," she whispered. "Just don't lose yourself in the process." Sleep never visited that night. My mind replayed the call, analyzing every crackle of static, every breath, every word. I stared at the ceiling until the dawn crept through the windows in thin grey lines. My phone buzzed again, a real number this time. Ramirez, one of the few who still looked me in the eyes. "You awake?" I responded immediately. "Yeah." His reply came fast. "Need to see you. Found something." A chill ran through me, not of fear, but of hope. A dangerous hope, the kind that could break a man if it turned out to be wrong. He arrived at my door looking like he hadn't slept either. Without speaking, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. No label, no marking, just a small piece of plastic that made my chest tighten. "You might want to sit down," he said, and right then, I knew my life was about to split into a before and after. Ramirez didn't speak at first. He just placed the flash drive on my kitchen table like it was something alive, something that might bite if we touched it wrong. My wife hovered near the doorway, arms folded, eyes darting between us. Ramirez ran a hand through his hair, the gesture tense and out of character for someone usually steady as bedrock. "I found this in archives," he said finally. "It wasn't supposed to be there." My pulse thudded hard. "Found what?" I asked. Even though the answer vibrated in my bones before he spoke, he nudged the flash drive toward me. "Your bodycam backup," he said, "from that night." For a second, everything inside me went still, completely still. My breath, my thoughts, even the sound of the refrigerator humming behind us faded. "There is no backup," I said slowly, the words echoing IA's rehearsed phrasing. "They told me the transmission failed. The camera was damaged." Ramirez sat, elbows on the table. "That's what they told all of us," he said, "but someone hid this, buried it." He leaned in. "Cole, this was stuffed into a box labeled for a narcotics case from years ago. A sealed box that someone had to deliberately reopen." My stomach twisted. My wife stepped closer, laying a hand on my shoulder. "You need to see it," Ramirez added. "But you need to be prepared." Prepared, as if that were possible. We used my old laptop, the same one I'd nearly thrown away twice. Ramirez slid the flash drive in, and the computer paused like it had to wake itself up before recognizing something that heavy. Finally, one file appeared. A long string of random characters, no timestamp, no label, just digital secrecy. I hovered the cursor over it, my fingers trembling. "You don't have to," my wife started, but I clicked before she could finish. Static cracked through the speakers, loud enough to make all three of us flinch. The screen flickered, then stabilized. There it was, the alley. The timestamp in the corner matched the night Alvarez disappeared. My throat tightened painfully. The beam of my flashlight cut through the dark. The shaky angle showed my shoulder. Alvarez's voice rose beside me. "This place smells like a wet dumpster had a child with a sewer," he muttered. I almost laughed, almost. My chest tightened at the sound of his voice, alive, unaware of what was coming. We moved deeper, our steps cautious, our formation automatic. We called out, announced ourselves. Nothing answered. Then something shifted in the shadows, a figure near the fence. Hoodie pulled low. I heard my own voice command them to show their hands. They didn't. The silence stretched, suffocating even in replay. Somewhere behind us, something clattered. Alvarez angled left, eyes narrowing. "Cole," he murmured, "this is off." He was right. The ambush came fast, too fast. A rush of motion behind me, a glint of metal. Alvarez's shout, "Behind you!" A pipe swung, connected. The world spun violently. The bodycam jolted, crashed sideways, capturing a smear of pavement and sky. My own groan sounded strange, distant, too vulnerable for how I remembered myself. The flashlight beam rolled across the alley, catching flashes of movement. Alvarez was on the attacker instantly, tackling him with ferocity. I saw the second man rush in, then a third. Alvarez fought like hell. He didn't hesitate, didn't run. He fought for both of us. A gunshot exploded in the speakers. I jumped. My wife did too. Alvarez staggered but stayed upright. He tried to reach me, tried to pull me up. His face came into frame briefly, eyes furious, jaw clenched, desperation etched deep. Then someone grabbed him from behind, dragged him. He yelled my name. Or maybe he yelled something else. The audio warped at that moment, as if the world itself didn't want me to know. They yanked him toward a van at the far end. The door slammed, tires screeched. The plate flashed across the screen for half a second before the feed corrupted. Then the video ended. Silence swallowed the room. My chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. My wife's hand tightened on my shoulder. Ramirez sat back in his chair, shaking his head slowly. "They lied to you," he said, "to all of us." I felt something hot behind my eyes, not tears, something sharper. Rage, relief, grief that had nowhere stable to land. "He's alive," I said, the words cracking. "They took him alive." Ramirez nodded grimly. "And someone in our house hid that." The thought slashed through the air like a blade. A beat passed, then my phone buzzed. Zeros. The anonymous caller. My hand shook as I answered. "Cole," I said, voice rough. The distorted voice breathed softly before speaking. "Now you understand," it said. "He wasn't supposed to die. Not yet." My blood froze. Ramirez's eyes widened. My wife pressed closer. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Why are you helping me?" A soft exhale, a laugh, filtered through static. "Helping you," the voice echoed. "I'm helping justice, and justice has been buried for too long." My pulse thundered. "Where is he?" I asked. "Where are they keeping him?" A crackle. Then, "Follow the plate, and don't trust anyone wearing a badge who asks where you're going." The line clicked dead. I stared at the silent phone, my heartbeat loud enough to drown everything else out. "We start with the plate," Ramirez said quietly. My wife looked between us, fear tightening her face. "This isn't just departmental misconduct," she whispered. "This is organized, hidden, dangerous, people willing to kill." Ramirez didn't deny it. That spoke louder than anything he could have said. "You don't have to do this," she told me, voice pleading. "Let the department handle—" "The department buried the evidence," I said, turning to her. "The department decided the narrative before I could even answer their questions. If I don't do this, they'll close Alvarez's file and call it a tragedy, and he'll still be out there." She pressed her lips together, eyes glassy. "Then don't go alone." I squeezed her hand once, gratitude and apology tangled together. "I'm not," I said. "Ramirez is with me." He nodded once, solid as a pillar beside me. Not a replacement for Alvarez, no one could be, but someone who hadn't looked away when the whispers started. We began enhancing the plate with every tool my old laptop could still run. Grain by grain, pixel by pixel, the numbers sharpened. 3 numbers, 1 letter, a partial state icon, enough to narrow it down. Ramirez made a discreet call to a contact he trusted. His voice dropped into codes and half-phrases meant to signal urgency without specifics. When he returned, his expression was carved from worry. "We've got a lead," he said. "A storage facility outside city limits. The kind of place no one uses unless they don't want neighbors." My wife inhaled sharply. Ramirez added, "We check it out, slowly, carefully. No hero stuff, no backup unless we absolutely need it." I nodded, but inside, something fierce was forming. A resolve I hadn't felt since before the suspension, before the rumors, before doubt had started rewriting my own memories. "We'll find him," I said. "We follow the lead, we go quiet." Ramirez clapped my shoulder. "Then we go tonight," he said. "Less traffic, less eyes." My wife pulled me aside before we left. Her hands framed my face. "Come home," she whispered. "Whatever you find, just come home." I nodded, but we both knew it wasn't a promise I could make. Still, her steadiness grounded me long enough to breathe. "I'll try," I murmured. She kissed my forehead. "Then that's enough." Ramirez and I met again after sunset. The city noise felt muted as we drove toward the industrial outskirts, roads that people forgot existed unless they had secrets to hide. As we neared the facility, a hollow feeling opened in my chest. Rows of metal storage units stretched across cracked pavement like empty shells. No movement, no sound, just dim lights flickering above rusted doors. We parked far from the entrance and killed the engine. The night pressed close around us. I looked at Ramirez. He looked at me. No words were needed. This wasn't a rescue mission yet. This was reconnaissance. A step into the dark where truth waited with teeth bared. And whatever we found here, it would change everything. The air around the storage facility felt wrong the moment we stepped out of the car. Too still. Too heavy. The kind of quiet that doesn't happen naturally. Not in a city like ours. Not even on the forgotten edges where streetlights flicker themselves to death and no one bothers to replace them. Ramirez scanned the area with a methodical calm I envied. My own heart hammered too loudly, each beat reminding me that if Alvarez was really inside one of those metal cages, every second mattered. But rushing in blind was how men got killed. I'd already made one mistake on that alley. I couldn't make another here. We crouched behind a row of abandoned pallets, watching the front gate. A single security camera rotated lazily, sweeping the entrance. "Doesn't look like traffic's heavy," Ramirez whispered, "but someone's paying for power. That means someone cares enough to keep this place running." I nodded, eyes tracing the length of each unit. Most were rusted, doors pulled down like eyelids, guarding things no one wanted seen. But one row, especially Unit 14C, looked wrong. Cleaner metal, newer locks, less dust, like someone visited often. Ramirez nudged my elbow. "2 guys, northwest corner." I followed his gaze. Two men, dressed in dark clothing, not uniforms, but carrying themselves with the unmistakable posture of people trained to move through danger. They weren't here to load boxes or check inventory. They were guards, watching, waiting, protecting something, or someone. My throat tightened. "He's here," I murmured. "Has to be." We watched them for 10 minutes. Neither spoke, neither laughed. Their patrols were patterned, precise. Not amateurs, not street thugs, professionals, or something close enough. "If they're rotating like that," Ramirez said quietly, "there's a blind spot behind this row. Camera can't see it. They rely on foot patrol to catch anyone sneaking in." My pulse kicked up. "We use the blind spot," I said. "We stay low, move fast, and hope they don't change their route tonight." Ramirez gave a short nod. "We should wait for them to hit the far corner," he said. "That'll buy us 30 seconds. 30 seconds. That was nothing. But it was also everything. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, tiny needles tapping against the metal roofs, masking the faint crunch of our movements. If I believed in omens, I would have taken the rain as one. A cleansing, a warning, a cover. Who knows? All I knew was that it meant our footsteps were quieter, the world was darker, and the guards might be less willing to stand in the open for long. When their silhouettes disappeared around the far corner, Ramirez whispered, "Now." We sprinted, low, controlled, silent, tucked beneath the steady drum of rain. The metal units rose around us like steel tombs. My lungs burned, not from the run, but from anticipation, adrenaline, fear that coiled tight enough to snap. We reached the back wall and slid into the shadowed strip where the cameras couldn't see. My breathing came out in thin clouds. Ramirez pressed his palm to the wall of Unit 14C, feeling the temperature difference. "Warm," he said. "Something's running inside. Power. Maybe heat." My chest constricted. Or someone. We stood there, rain filling the silence, until my phone buzzed again in my pocket. Zeros. The anonymous caller. Every instinct told me not to answer. Not here, not now, but instincts hadn't gotten me this far. I swiped the screen. Before I could speak, the distorted voice whispered, "You're close." I swallowed. "Is he in 14C?" I whispered back. Ramirez leaned in, listening. The voice paused long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then 2 guards on rotation, 1 camera on a separate circuit. The lock is reinforced. My pulse quickened. "Who are you?" I asked. A soft inhale. "Someone who remembers what loyalty means," the voice said. "Do not trigger the alarm circuit. If you trip it, they'll move him or kill him." The rain hissed against metal. "How do I get in?" I asked. The voice responded in a rushed whisper. "The padlock is real, but the kill switch is inside the hinge casing. Open the exterior lock without shifting the hinge, and you'll be fine. Touch the hinge, you're dead." The call ended. Ramirez blinked. "Well," he said breathlessly, "that's comforting." I stared at the lock. Rainwater dripped from my lashes. Every nerve in my body was alive. "We don't have a choice," I said. "If he's in there, we go now." Ramirez pulled a small lockpick kit from his jacket. "I can try," he said. "But if that hinge trips—" I finished the sentence for him. "We die," I said. "Yeah, I heard." The rain drowned out most sound as Ramirez knelt and worked. I stood facing the yard, scanning for movement, for flashes of light, for anything that suggested the guards had doubled back. My heart hammered so loud I thought it might echo. Each second was a lifetime. Then, click. The lock popped open in Ramirez's hand. He exhaled shakily. "Got it!" We exchanged a look that carried far more than words. Hope, fear, determination, regret. A lifetime of the job in a single glance. We lifted the door slowly. A crack, a breath of air, a smell I will never forget. Metal, Sweat, old blood, damp concrete, the kind of smell that meant someone had lived in fear inside these walls for far too long. Ramirez raised his flashlight, beam slicing through the gloom. A cot, a table, chains on the wall. My stomach lurched. Then movement, a figure slumped on the cot, head lifting weakly at the sound of the door. My breath left me entirely. "Alvarez," I whispered. His eyes blinked at the light. Confusion, pain, fear, recognition, all washing across his face in the span of a heartbeat. "Cole!" His voice was raw, broken, disbelieving. I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands hovering over his arms, afraid to touch him too hard. "Hey!" I said softly, voice shaking. "Hey! We've got you! I've got you!" Ramirez moved to check his restraints, jaw tight. Alvarez's hand twitched toward me, fingers ghosting over my sleeve like he needed proof I was real. "You're—" he rasped. "You're alive!" I almost laughed, almost cried. Both emotions crashed into each other and tangled in my throat. "Yeah," I said. "You too." His breathing hitched, and for a moment he closed his eyes like the weight of being found was too much. Ramirez cursed softly. The ankle shackle was reinforced. "We'll need tools," he whispered. "I can't break this with my hands." I stood, scanning the room. "Find something," I said. My voice was too loud in my ears, too desperate. "Anything." That's when the voice behind us spoke. Cold. Familiar. "You really should have stayed suspended, Cole." My blood iced. I turned slowly. A figure stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat. Lieutenant Mark Hansen, Internal Affairs. The man who'd interrogated me, questioned me, judged me. The man who had the most to gain from my downfall. Behind him, 2 more men stepped in. Armed, calm, ready. Hansen smirked. "You weren't supposed to make it this far." Ramirez reached for his waistband. "Don't," Hansen said sharply. "You're outnumbered." He stepped inside fully, letting the door close behind him with a hollow, metallic roll. "I told IA you'd crack," he continued, his tone disgustingly casual. "But I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to follow the breadcrumbs all the way here." His eyes landed on Alvarez. "You were supposed to die quietly. Both of you." Something in me snapped. Not fear, not panic. Something colder, a line being drawn. "You did this," I said. "You ordered the ambush." Hansen tilted his head. "Ambush is such a loaded word," he said. "I prefer corrective action." My fists clenched. "You sold intel," I growled. "You let criminals walk. You put officers in the line of fire for money." His smile widened. "And you were the perfect fall guy, a convenient coward." That word, coward, hit me differently this time. Not like a knife, like fuel. "You called me a coward to hide your own," I said, "but you made one mistake." Hansen raised an eyebrow. "Just one." "Yeah," I said, stepping in front of Alvarez. "You didn't kill me." Before Hansen could respond, the faint echo of sirens rose in the distance. His expression faltered. Ramirez smirked. "Did you really think I'd come here without leaving a breadcrumb with someone I trust?" Hansen swore under his breath. The balance shifted. His men tensed. I reached for the small pistol at my ankle and raised it, hands steady. "This ends now," I said, and for the first time since the alley, I felt like myself again. The man Alvarez believed I was. The man my daughter thought I was. Not a coward. A cop. The sirens grew louder, just faint enough to make Hansen doubt himself, just close enough to tilt the balance in our favor. His jaw tightened. He motioned to his men with a sharp flick of the wrist, but their hesitation betrayed them. They hadn't expected company. They hadn't expected the clean narrative they'd built to collapse in a single night, and they definitely hadn't expected me, suspended, disgraced, supposedly broken, to stand inside this storage unit like someone who still had something left to fight for. "Put the gun down, Cole," Hansen said, voice dropping into that controlled, authoritative tone internal affairs love to weaponize. You point a weapon at an IA lieutenant while under suspension, and that's the end of your career. You'll never wear that badge again. Rain drummed against the thin metal roof, thunder rolling somewhere beyond the walls. My hand didn't shake. Not anymore. You buried evidence, I said. You let them take my partner. You lied to an entire department to protect your own crimes. A muscle twitched near his eye. You don't understand what you're dealing with, he said. This goes higher than me. I stepped forward, just enough for the light to catch the resolve hardening in my face. Good, I said. Then more heads will roll. His men shifted, uncertain. The sirens drew closer. One of them whispered, Lieutenant? But Hansen ignored him. He kept his eyes on me, calculating, cold and cornered in a way he hadn't expected to be tonight. Do you really think anyone's going to believe you over me? He asked. Your reputation is already ruined. You're a convenient villain, a narrative the department already accepted. My grip tightened around the pistol. The footage speaks for itself, I said, and Alvarez is alive. That alone blows your entire operation apart. His smirk faltered, just barely, but enough to tell me we had finally punctured his arrogance. Alvarez, still slumped against the wall, managed to raise his head. You're talking too much, Lieutenant, he rasped. Always did. Hansen's gaze snapped toward him, sharp, venomous, rattled. The sirens cut off suddenly. Engines hummed to a stop. Doors slammed somewhere in the distance. Hansen's men tensed like wolves cornered by a pack they couldn't see. Ramirez's breath came out slow, controlled, fingers inching subtly toward the tool he'd used to break the lock. He wasn't reaching for a gun. He was preparing to improvise. Good. We might need both. The first flashlight beam cut across the row of units outside. Voices followed, clear, commanding, organized. Not Hansen's men, not his allies. Someone else had arrived. You did this, Hansen hissed at Ramirez. You called them. Ramirez shrugged, though the tension around his eyes betrayed how close we all were to the edge. Told you, he said. I'm not letting Cole walk into something like this alone. The crack in Hansen's composure widened. You idiot, he snapped. You have no idea what you've triggered. He glanced at the door, then back at us. If they find this place, none of us walk out. Not me. Not you. Not him. He jabbed a finger at Alvarez. They'll burn this entire operation before letting it leak. I felt something cold slide down my spine. He wasn't bluffing. He was scared, and scared people make desperate choices. We're leaving, Hansen said. His hand darted toward his holster. I fired first. The shot cracked like lightning against metal walls. Not a kill shot. Never that. The bullet tore into the floor an inch from Hansen's foot, ricocheting against the concrete with a sharp, metallic whine. Hansen froze, eyes wide. Next one goes into your leg, I said, voice low and trembling with rage I'd spent weeks suffocating. And the one after that goes higher. For the first time since I'd known him, Hansen's confidence fractured fully. Fear replaced calculation. He lifted his hands, slow, deliberate, shaking at the edges. Ramirez moved in instantly, kicking Hansen's weapon across the floor. One of Hansen's men lunged, but Ramirez slammed him against the wall with a controlled takedown that knocked the air from his lungs. The other guard stepped forward, fists raised, but stopped when my pistol tracked to center mass. Nah, I said, not today. The man hesitated, then slowly lowered himself to his knees. Outside, voices approached, the unmistakable stomp of boots. Unit 14C, someone shouted. We've got movement inside. Hansen looked at me with something venomous and broken all at once. You think this clears you? He spat. You think the department walks away from this clean? You're a fool, Cole. They will bury this. They will bury you. I stepped closer, lowering the gun only slightly. Not this time, I said. "You buried the wrong man." The door rolled up violently. Floodlights exploded into the room. Tactical officers stormed in, 2, then 4, then 6, guns drawn, voices overlapping as they took control. Ramirez stepped back with his hands raised. He knew the drill. I did the same. The lead officer, a captain I recognized, one of the few with a reputation for honesty, froze the second he saw Alvarez chained to the wall. "Holy! Get EMS in here," he barked. "Now!" Officers swarmed Hansen and his men, cuffing them with efficient precision. Hansen didn't fight. He looked at me instead, an expression of pure hatred etched into his features. "You just destroyed this department," he said. "Congratulations." "No," I replied quietly. "I saved it." They dragged him out. His men followed, pale and shaken. The room suddenly felt bigger, emptier, without Hansen's corruption filling the space. I fell to my knees beside Alvarez. EMS rushed in, cutting the restraints with bolt cutters, easing him onto a stretcher. He gripped my wrist weakly, eyes glossy with exhaustion and relief. "You came," he whispered. His voice trembled on the last word. I leaned down, my forehead almost touching his. "Of course I came," I said. "I should have come sooner." He blinked slowly. "Not your fault," he murmured. "Never was." The words broke something open inside me, something I didn't realize had been caged as tightly as Alvarez had been. They loaded him into the ambulance, monitors beeping softly. I followed until a paramedic gently pushed me back. "We'll take care of him," she said. "You'll see him at the hospital." When the ambulance doors closed, the weight of the night crashed into me all at once. My legs buckled. Ramirez caught my shoulder, steadying me. "You did it," he said. "We did it." But the truth was heavier. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Because whatever Hansen was protecting, whoever he answered to, hadn't shown their face yet. And the department, they now had to confront the truth they'd tried so hard to bury. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something that had been missing for far too long. Breath. Hope. A pulse that didn't hurt. They called me a coward. I whispered to no one in particular. Ramirez squeezed my shoulder. "They were wrong," he said. I looked at the empty stretcher rail still dangling from the ambulance. "No," I replied softly. "They're about to find out how wrong." The hospital air felt like it always did. Too clean, too cold, too bright. A place where truth was measured in vitals and quiet conversations rather than accusations and rumors. I arrived still wearing the same clothes from the night before, soaked through by rain and tension that hadn't loosened even after Alvarez was taken inside. Ramirez walked beside me, jaw tight, eyes scanning the hallways like he expected danger to walk out from behind a curtain. But nothing threatened us here. Not yet. Not in this liminal space where the department couldn't hide what had happened and couldn't spin the narrative fast enough to control it. A nurse pointed us to a private room, one with a security officer posted outside, not to watch Alvarez, but to protect him. A shift in roles I wasn't sure anyone had prepared for. The guard was young, barely out of academy, but he stepped aside respectfully. Maybe he recognized me. Maybe he'd already heard whispers of what went down at the storage facility. Maybe, for the first time in weeks, my name carried something other than suspicion. Inside, Alvarez lay propped up slightly, oxygen cannula in place, IVs dangling beside him. His face was bruised, his skin pale, but his eyes were clearer than I'd expected. When he saw me, he tried to smile. It came out crooked and weak, but it was real. "You look like hell," he rasped. The breath I let out might have been a laugh. "Takes one to know one." Ramirez pulled a chair closer, sinking into it with the heaviness of someone who'd spent all night holding someone else's life in their hands. "Doc says he'll live," he reported. "Broken ribs, dehydration, bruises everywhere, but nothing permanent." Alvarez rolled his eyes upward. Permanent's overrated. But even as he joked, the tension behind his expression betrayed how much he'd endured. I moved closer, pulling the chair to his bedside. For a moment, none of us spoke. We just sat there, 3 officers in a sterile room, each of us carrying scars the fluorescent lights couldn't illuminate. "What happened?" Ramirez finally asked gently. "After they took you?" Alvarez's face tightened. He stared at the ceiling for a moment, gathering the threads of a story he probably didn't want to revisit. "They hit me again," he said. "In the van. Didn't knock me out the first time. Wanted me aware. Wanted me scared. Then they chained me up in that unit, kept asking about cases we'd worked, especially ones that disappeared off our desk suddenly. They wanted to know what I knew, what I might have seen." My stomach twisted. "And Hansen. That bastard!" Alvarez let out a dry, humorless exhale. "He came by twice. Told the others to keep me alive until further notice. Told them I was leverage. Told them you'd fall apart without me." He paused, eyes shifting to mine. "Guess he underestimated you." I swallowed hard, emotion rising in a lump I wasn't ready to face. "I should have found you sooner." "No," he said firmly, his weak voice sharpening just enough. "You should have survived, and you did. That's why I'm still breathing right now." His words struck deeper than he probably intended. I sat back, trying to steady myself. "Internal Affairs is going to tear the precinct apart over this," Ramirez said quietly. "There's no burying it now." Alvarez scoffed. "They'll try." He winced slightly as the movement tugged at his ribs. "They'll say Hansen acted alone. Rogue lieutenant. Classic story." I looked toward the window where early light filtered through pale curtains. "Then we show them everything," I said. "The footage, the storage unit, the guards, the plate, the call logs, all of it." Ramirez nodded. "Already in motion," he said. "The captain who responded last night is ballistic. He's pushing for federal oversight." Alvarez let out a short laugh. "Bet Hansen didn't see that coming." His eyes softened, drifting back to me. "Neither did you, huh?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was complicated, twisted, raw. For weeks, I'd lived under the weight of a narrative I couldn't fight, because the department had decided it before evidence surfaced, because the rumor was more convenient than the truth, because a coward is easier to understand than corruption. I hadn't known how to stand up under the weight of a lie that felt heavier every day, and yet here I was. Not cleared yet, not vindicated yet, but no longer drowning. Something shifted in the doorway. We all turned. My wife stood there, eyes red from sleeplessness, hair tied back hastily, expression caught somewhere between relief and terror. "They told me he was alive," she whispered, stepping forward, "and that you found him." I rose from my chair as she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me. The hug wasn't gentle, it was desperate, fierce, like she had spent weeks holding herself together with threads that were finally allowed to loosen. "You scared me," she murmured into my shoulder, "both of you." I held her tightly, grounding myself in the reality of her warmth, her breath, her presence. "I know," I whispered back. "I'm sorry." She pulled back, wiping her cheeks. "Don't be sorry," she said. "Just don't do anything alone again. Not like this." She glanced at Ramirez. "Thank you for not letting him." Ramirez shrugged, but his expression softened. "He's my partner now," he said, "whether IA likes it or not." The word partner made something inside me settle, not because it replaced Alvarez. Nothing could. But because it meant I wasn't stepping into the fire alone anymore. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand. "He'll need rest," she said. "A lot of it. Physical therapy, hydration, monitoring for infection, but he's stable. You can talk to him later. Right now, let him sleep." We nodded. Alvarez gave us a faint wave. lids drooping. "Don't let them twist it," he whispered. "Don't let them turn it into another story where I didn't matter." "You mattered," I said. "You still do." His eyes closed. We stepped outside the room. I leaned back against the wall, letting my breath spill out slowly, like a weight had finally slid off my ribs. But another weight settled in its place. Responsibility, exposure, the knowledge that truth meant conflict, and conflict meant fallout. And the department, it was already spiraling. 2 internal affairs agents paced at the end of the hallway, whispering urgently. A deputy chief stepped out of an elevator, his face tight and pale. Someone murmured the phrase, "Federal inquiry." Another said, "Press statement." Everyone moved with the frantic urgency of a building realizing its foundation was cracked. Ramirez checked his phone. "They want statements," he said. "Official ones. Today." My stomach flipped. "They'll try to spin this," I said. "Try to say Hansen went rogue." "Won't stick," Ramirez replied. "Too many logs missing, too many discrepancies in the system. Too many people saw him dragged out in cuffs. But I knew the department, knew its need to protect its image." "They'll try anyway," I said quietly. My wife took my hand. "Then don't let them." For a moment, none of us spoke. Then a female officer I barely recognized approached, hesitant. "Officer Cole," she said, voice small. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." She swallowed hard. "I didn't know. We didn't know. I should have asked questions. I should have trusted." She cut herself off. "Anyway, I'm sorry." Her apology cracked something open inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but space. Space where truth could breathe for the first time. And I realized something then. Something simple, something painful, something freeing. I hadn't been fighting to restore my reputation. I'd been fighting to uncover the truth. Everything after that, apologies, hearings, press, vindication, was secondary. Alvarez was alive. The corruption was exposed, and the story that had haunted every hallway of the precinct was about to collapse under the weight of reality. But as a reporter walked past us with her microphone tucked under her coat, as IA officers whispered furiously, as the hospital bustled with tension, I knew the hardest part was still ahead, not the rescue, not the confrontation, but telling the world what really happened, because truth is powerful, but truth is also dangerous. And once released, it doesn't go back into its cage. The day of the hearing arrived faster than any of us were ready for. It was as if the department, after weeks of dragging its feet, suddenly wanted everything resolved before the truth had room to grow teeth. My stomach churned from the moment I woke up, not from fear of speaking, though that unsettled me too, but from what this day represented. The end of the story they'd written about me, and the beginning of the one I chose to tell. My wife adjusted my tie with trembling hands. She tried to hide it, but I felt the shake. "You don't have to be perfect," she whispered. "Just be honest." I didn't have the heart to tell her that honesty was exactly what many of the people in that room didn't want to hear. Our daughter peeked from the hallway, clutching a drawing she'd made days earlier. Me, Alvarez, and Ramirez, drawn as stick figures, wearing badges shaped like hearts. Above it, she'd written, "My dad is brave." The words hit harder than any accusation the department had thrown at me. Bravery. The thing everyone decided I didn't have, except her. My wife kissed my cheek. "Whatever happens," she murmured, "you're walking in there with the truth. That matters more than anything they can say." I nodded, even though the knot in my stomach refused to loosen. The precinct's conference hall, repurposed today as a public hearing room, buzzed with the kind of energy you only feel when people gather to witness something they know will hurt. Officers filled the chairs, reporters lined the walls, lawyers whispered, command staff sat stiff and polished, masks of control stretched over fear they couldn't quite hide. Every pair of eyes followed me when I walked in. The look was different now, not contempt, not confidence, not judgment. Something more uncertain, something like people realizing the ghost they'd been pointing fingers at had returned in the flesh, carrying evidence they hadn't expected to ever see daylight. Ramirez gave me a quick nod from across the room. He sat beside an empty wheelchair that wouldn't be empty for long. Then they brought Alvarez in. He was pale, thinner, moving slower than the man I remembered, but he was alive, sitting upright, gripping the wheels of the chair himself. The room shifted, a collective inhalation rolling through it. People whispered. A few officers lowered their heads. Some stared with something like shame flickering behind their eyes, because his presence alone shattered the narrative. A dead partner is a tragedy. A kidnapped, silenced, living partner is a scandal. And a rescued one, a ticking bomb. They positioned us side by side at the long table facing the department brass. Microphones glowed red before us, like waiting mouths. Cameras flashed. The chief cleared her throat, though the papers in her hands shook slightly. "We are here," she began, "to present the findings of the internal review into the disappearance of Officer Miguel Alvarez and the suspension of Officer Henry Cole." She spoke for nearly 10 minutes about procedural integrity, departmental oversight, systemic gaps, and misconduct under investigation. Beautiful words, empty words. Words polished by lawyers until they had no corners left to catch truth on. None of them mattered. The only thing that mattered was the footage cued on the large screen behind her. People had seen fragments of it in internal briefings, but not like this. Not the full sequence. Uninterrupted, unedited, laid bare. When the screen flickered to life and the alley appeared in harsh bodycam angles, a hush fell so deep, I swear I heard my own heartbeat echo back at me. Every grunt, every shout, every blow, every second Alvarez fought while I lay unconscious. Every moment of truth the department had buried. The room stiffened as the van doors slammed shut in the video. A couple of officers flinched. One wiped his eyes discreetly. The chief's mask cracked just slightly. When she realized the silence wasn't going to soften for her, when the footage ended, she swallowed hard and said, "Officer Cole, you may speak." I hadn't prepared a speech. Anything rehearsed would have sounded like a lie, and I'd had enough lies to last a lifetime. So I leaned forward, inhaled slowly, and let the words come the only way they could, straight from the part of me that had been bruised, doubted, and blamed for weeks. For a long time, I began, I thought silence was supposed to protect me, that if I stayed quiet, stayed compliant, stayed patient, the truth would surface on its own. I glanced at Alvarez beside me. His nod was almost imperceptible, but silence didn't protect me. It buried me. A murmur rippled through the room. "When I woke up in that alley," I continued, voice steady but heavy, "I didn't know what had happened to my partner. I didn't know who hit me. I didn't know how many attackers there were. I didn't know where they took him. All I knew was that by the time backup arrived, he was gone. And before I could even understand what happened, the department decided I froze." A few heads lowered. "They decided I hesitated, that I didn't go after him, that I didn't call for help fast enough, that maybe," I paused, "maybe I wasn't the kind of officer worth trusting." Silence stretched tight. I answered every question IA asked. I told them everything I remembered. But my answers weren't the ones they wanted. The narrative was easier than the truth. A simple story. One officer panics, one officer disappears. End of file. I exhaled shakily. What hurt wasn't just the suspension. It wasn't even the rumors. I finally looked at the officers gathered before me. It was how quickly some of you believed them. A few faces crumpled, others looked away. A couple stared back defiantly, refusing to yield even now. But it didn't matter. This wasn't for them. Courage, I said, is something we claim to value. But courage isn't just running toward danger. Sometimes courage is waiting for the full story before you condemn someone. Sometimes it's looking at the man you've worked beside for years and saying, I don't have all the facts, so I won't judge yet. That's the courage we lacked. My eyes burned, but my voice didn't waver. I didn't abandon my partner, I said quietly. I was unconscious. Alvarez didn't disappear because I failed him. He was taken by people who knew exactly how to twist the story afterward, and instead of asking why the footage was missing, why the logs were altered, why the investigation felt rushed, some of you asked why I didn't run faster. A deep breath. And now you know why. I stepped back from the microphone. For a moment, nothing happened. No applause, no anger, just raw, heavy stillness. Then Alvarez wheeled himself forward, gripping the microphone with a shaking hand. He didn't leave me, he said, voice hoarse but powerful enough to reach the back row. He never would have. And if anyone here thinks he's a coward... He looked around the room, eyes burning with something fierce. Then you don't know him. Not at all. The room erupted. Not into applause, not yet, but into motion. Officers whispering, reporters scribbling so fast their pens scraped, lawyers arguing quietly. Something had shifted. A truth too large to push back into darkness had finally surfaced. The chief cleared her throat shakily. Effective immediately, she said. Officer Cole's suspension is rescinded. All allegations previously associated with his case are withdrawn. Additionally, a federal inquiry will begin into the actions of Lieutenant Hansen and any associated personnel. The words landed heavy, final, and freeing. But even as they reverberated through the room, I knew vindication wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of accountability. And accountability was a storm no one in this department was prepared to weather. When the hearing adjourned, people approached me, some with apologies, some with hollow congratulations, some with relief disguised as camaraderie. I accepted the words politely, but my mind wasn't on them. It was on Alvarez. He reached for my hand when I walked toward him. Told you, he murmured. You weren't alone. I squeezed back. Neither were you. He gave a faint, tired laugh. But next time, let's stick to paperwork. For the first time in months, I felt a laugh break free without weight behind it. Outside, flashes from cameras lit the air. Reporters called my name. The department's walls hummed with the tension of a secret finally broken open. Officers stood in clusters, arguing about what this meant for all of them, but I didn't stop to absorb any of it. I walked outside into the cool air, my wife's hand finding mine, my daughter running into my arms. The truth had finally come out. But the fallout, that was coming next, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. In the days following the hearing, the department felt like a house whose walls had been stripped bare. No one walked the halls without glancing over their shoulder. Conversations dropped to whispers the second I approached, not the way they had before, full of suspicion and contempt, but now with caution, uncertainty. People weren't sure what I knew, what I'd uncovered, or who else might be pulled into the investigation that had already begun rolling like a boulder down a hill. The rumor mill didn't know what to do with the truth. For so long, the narrative had been simple. I froze, Alvarez vanished, end of story. But now the truth stood in front of them, living, breathing, undeniable, and it forced everyone to re-examine the parts they'd played, the side glances, the whispered judgments, the eagerness to believe the worst because it was easier than asking the right questions. Some officers avoided me more than ever, not because they thought I was guilty, but because guilt lived inside them now. A guilt I didn't ask them to carry, but one they had earned. Others, the braver ones, stopped me in hallways with small, clumsy apologies. "Didn't know the whole story," they muttered. "Should have waited." I nodded, accepting their words with the quiet resignation of someone who understood too well how humans fill silence with assumptions. But nothing anyone said, not the apologies, not the stares, not the sudden respect, mattered as much as the first time I walked into Alvarez's hospital room after the hearing. He looked stronger already, color slowly returning to his face, the bruising fading just enough to reveal the friend I'd known behind the damage. He gave me a nod that was small, but carried more weight than half the commendations hanging on the precinct's walls. "They clapped," he said, amused. "Didn't think I'd live to see that." I sat beside him, shaking my head. I didn't notice. I wasn't really listening. "You were busy telling the truth," he said. "About damn time someone did." He wasn't talking about me. Not really. He meant the department, the system, the place where both of us had given years of our lives believing we were working for something greater than ourselves. A belief that now felt cracked, but not broken. "Do you regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Any of it? The speech, the fight, the digging?" I thought about it, the nights awake replaying what had happened in that alley, the whispers that clung to my back like smoke, the weight of guilt that never belonged to me, the fear in my wife's eyes, the nightmares, the moment the bullet nearly left my gun inside that storage unit, and the moment, just a breath later, when Hanson's arrest shattered the narrative once and for all. "No," I said quietly. "Not anymore." He let out a slow breath. "Good," he said, "because they're going to need you." The phrase sat strangely in the room. "Need me?" I asked. He nodded. "After what came out, morale is shot. Trust is fractured. The rookies don't know who to believe. Command's scrambling. IA is eating itself alive. And the only person who walked through fire and didn't come out lying about being burned is you." I didn't respond because I didn't know how. He wasn't wrong. But he also wasn't saying it because he believed in the department. He was saying it because he believed in me. The next morning, when I walked back into the precinct for the first time as a cleared officer, something unexpected happened. The room didn't fall silent in the way it had when I was suspended. It didn't erupt into applause either. It did something quieter, something harder to earn. It shifted. People moved out of the way for me, not out of fear, but out of respect. A few nodded, a few looked away, ashamed. A few clapped me lightly on the shoulder as I passed, and for the first time since the night of the ambush, I saw my nameplate on my locker without feeling like it belonged to a ghost. When I opened the door, Alvarez's old photo was still taped inside, him holding a coffee cup like a trophy, my daughter's handwriting beneath it, Uncle A. The sight hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. This time, though, it wasn't grief that cracked through my chest. It was something like home. The chief met me later that day, not with medals, not with promises, but with honesty. "We failed you," she said. "We failed him. We failed the oath. And we will spend a long time rebuilding what was lost." She paused. "But Cole, you're still here, and your voice carries weight now, more than command, more than PR, more than any report we release." She took a breath. "I want you leading part of the internal reform panel." The request stunned me. After everything, after the suspension, the whispers, the betrayal, they wanted me to help fix what had broken. My first instinct was to say no, to walk away, to protect what little healing I'd scraped together. But I thought of Alvarez, of Ramirez, of the rookies who'd stared at me with uncertainty, hoping I could show them which version of the story to believe, and I thought of my daughter, her picture framed beside my bed. My dad is brave. Courage wasn't running into danger. Not always. Sometimes courage was stepping back into the same building that once pushed you out and saying, "I'm not done." So I agreed. Weeks passed. Investigations expanded. Hansen named names. People were reassigned, suspended, arrested. Alvarez healed slowly. Ramirez grew into a partner I trusted more than I'd expected to trust anyone again. And little by little, the department changed. Not because the building wanted to, but because truth had forced it to. Some nights I still woke gasping, flashes of the alley creeping through my dreams. Some days I still felt the phantom weight of accusations that no longer lived outside my head, but I kept going, step by step, truth by truth. And eventually, something unexpected happened. Peace. Not the loud kind. Not the triumphant kind. The quiet kind. The kind that settles into your ribs without asking for applause. One evening, months after the rescue, Alvarez and I stood on the precinct steps as the sun dipped behind the city. He had a cane now, though he used it more out of habit than necessity. Ramirez joined us with 2 coffees, handing one to each of us. We stood there for a long moment, saying nothing. Just 3 men who'd crawled through hell and come back with the truth stitched into their bones. "You realize," Alvarez said finally, "they're going to turn our story into a training case." I groaned. "God help the rookies," he smirked. "No, seriously. They'll use it to teach judgment, patience, internal accountability, how not to let rumors dictate your actions." His smile softened, eyes turning toward me. "They'll use it to teach courage." I shook my head. "I don't think courage is the right word." Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it?" I thought for a long moment, the city buzzing softly below us. "Truth," I said. "Truth that hurts, truth that scares, truth that survives even when people try to bury it." I looked at both of them. "The truth saved us, not bravery." Alvarez nudged me. "Maybe both." Maybe he was right, but for the first time since the day whispers swallowed my name, I wasn't afraid to stand in the space between what people thought I was and what I knew myself to be. They'd once called me a coward, now they knew better, not because I'd shouted louder, not because I'd fought harder, but because the truth had finally found its way into the light. And once truth steps into the open, it doesn't step back. Months later, on a quiet evening when the city hummed at a gentler pace, my daughter crawled onto my lap with her latest drawing. 3 stick figures again, me, Alvarez, Ramirez, but this time we weren't wearing capes, we were wearing shields. Above the drawing, in her familiar uneven handwriting, she'd written, "My dad tells the truth," and somehow that felt better than brave, better than vindicated, better than anything the department could ever pin to my chest. Because bravery fades, reputations shift, stories get retold, but truth stays, truth saves, truth stands, and so do I.